Welcome to the Singularity Lab, your home for futurism, breaking technology, scientific exploration, and UAP discoveries. Join the conversation with expert guests on a unique journey that explores the limits of human innovation, evolution, and imagination.
And we are live. Welcome to the Singularity Lab, the show where we explore the intersection of technology, culture, and human evolution through the latest advancements in science, artificial intelligence, and disruptive technologies. Thank you so much for joining us today as we help you navigate the exciting and rapidly changing landscape of technology and its impact on society today and into the future. Joining me is my co-host, Brooks Lopez. Brooks is a program planner in the defense industry, has a degree in psychology with a focus on neuroscience, learning, and memory. He also has an MBA with a focus on international business. I think we're going to be leaning a bit on you today, Brooks, for our discussion. How's it going?
Going great. How about yourself, Mike?
Doing awesome. We've also got Randy joining us behind the scenes. He is our showrunner and production designer. Randy is responsible for everything you see and hear today. Today is going to be wild, you guys. We're going to be discussing both the identified and unidentified flying objects filling our skies and getting shot down across North America. Is this the drumbeat towards war with China or something else entirely? We're also going to look at the little-known Japanese World War II balloon program that attacked the continental United States. I'm stoked. We got a lot to share with you guys today. Brooks, what you've been tracking this story? Have you been kind of chatting around about this? And any interesting theories, ideas?
Well, definitely. I mean, right now, this all started obviously with the weather balloon that we let sit in our skies for, was it 3 days total? And then over the course of the past week, as NORAD continues to search our skies, we've seen object after object in the Western Hemisphere that either wasn't here before or is only recently being viewed by NORAD as something worth watching.
Yeah, there's a lot to be unpacked here. We're gonna go through all of this with you guys. I've spent the last 36 hours just digging deep and trying to figure out exactly what we're seeing across our skies, why it's something that seems to be new to NORAD. That's just mind-boggling. We're going to dig into all of that today. But before we do that, I wanted to dig into the Japanese World War II balloon program, because this is really interesting. And a lot of people don't know that this ever happened, because the Japanese during World War II really had no way to physically attack the United States in any sort of strategy that would be effective, but they came up with this ingenious idea, and I just wanted to share this with you guys. We've got a video clip here. Randy, if you could pull that up for us from YouTube. It's a 5-minute clip, but we're just going to take a look at this, and I'd love to get y'all's feedback and those of you who are watching today. We've got a lot of you joining us here. Thank you so much. Aaron Desario, good to see you. Neurostream, Arlene, Grant Levac, Peter, great to see you guys. Preston, Michael, Anonymous Rex, J. Allen Hynek, Simon Fly, Joel, and John Brusso. Great to see you all. So if you could go ahead and start play this clip for us, and let's dig into this.
By mid-1944, Japan is getting hit on a daily basis from B-29 bombers. They are literally obliterating cities. Japan was dying. And Japan's only reaction to this is to strike back. Japan is faced with a serious problem. They can't develop a high-tech weapon.
Our problem's in the brain inside of the Japanese head. There are 70 million of these in Japan.
But perhaps a low-tech weapon, like a balloon, could be launched against America.
A brain that thought in the modern way could
Looks
be
kind of familiar.
use the latest modern weapons.
They develop a technology that is absolutely brilliant. Simple in its approach, but the technical ability of
Is there any way you could turn the volume up, Randy? Folks are having a hard time hearing
on
it.
its way be controlled by a series of sandbags that gets it to its target is incredible.
Someone had to sit down and run the numbers to come up with exactly how many sandbags, exactly how far they could project the balloon to move. And I find that to be pretty incredible.
That same brain today remains the problem. Our problem.
This is so racist.
It went as far as Texas,
Well,
long as they
jingoist.
stay
Let's call it
they can carry
jingoist.
great distances.
Oh my God.
Depending on the wind and the altitude they maintained, they were falling all over Western America.
Could you pause it real quick? Because this is wild. These things were launching these things into the jet stream, and in order to ensure that they stayed at the right elevation to capture the jet stream, they had to automatically signal an explosion that would release a sandbag so that the actual balloon would go back higher and stay in the jet stream. And then these things were landing in the continental United States. The U.S. government was not saying a peep because they were terrified people would lose their minds.
And, keep in mind that not only is it releasing a sandbag to maintain its altitude in the jet stream, but none of that is from like remote timing. This is all done on a long-term timing schedule. The way that it maintained its ballast, the amount of mathematics that went into this is wild.
Just incredible. Sorry, Randy, kick it.
In May of 1945, a minister, his wife, and 5 children from their parish were out on an outing near a town called Lakeview, Oregon. The minister was parking the car. He'd let his wife out and the children. They went into the forest. He heard her exclaim, "Look what we've found." And seconds later,
Boom.
by the time he got up there, his wife, who was pregnant at the time and only 26 years old, and these 5 children were dead.
It's tragic to think just how unlucky this family was.
The only known deaths in the continental United States caused by the enemy during World War II.
The only known deaths in the United States caused by the enemy in World
And
War
the
II.
innocent curiosity that went horribly wrong.
There are still balloons out there, obviously. Of the thousands they sent over, less than 1,000 have been discovered. So you have to think that in the massive
These
forests
things
in Northwest, Canada, Washington, Oregon, there are some
are
balloons
out there.
Well, the Pacific Northwest is so
hiking in the
gigantic, we'll never
Northwest,
find
be
them
a little
all.
careful.
Bigfoot's
If
put
you
a
see
few
an
in
elephant
caves somewhere,
with real
probably.
teeth on it, that's the sharp end of a disaster awaiting you.
Look at that thing.
It can't explode. They're still there. They're still waiting to be found.
Okay, you can go ahead and kill it. So it's just mind-boggling that the United States government did such a good job in covering that up, and most people still don't know about it today. I only discovered this just doing some research into it. We covered this on the Singularity Lab in the past, but I thought that with the Chinese spy balloon and what we're seeing here today, that it's quite interesting to think that balloons actually have an important strategic implication when it comes to not only espionage but potentially with payloads.
It really is, and just not to segue us too much, but the U.S.'s kind of contrapposto action for this, instead of using balloons, was releasing bats with incendiary into Tokyo because of all the wooden buildings the Japanese had. So we really had both sides using non-technological solutions to increase casualties amongst their opposition here.
Right, and you would imagine that today, with all of the technology we have, with the drone capabilities we have, with the technology that's available, that we would not be seeing balloons used in either espionage or warfare. But here we are, and this was kind of a wake-up call for American citizens. And I'm very curious to what extent, these have been around, and we just haven't been paying attention. And I do wonder if civilians hadn't picked up on this, if they hadn't seen this. I believe it was first seen in Montana. If civilians hadn't picked up on this, I do wonder if this would have even made the news cycle. And then would these other objects that NORAD has been capturing on radar and taking down over North America, would we even know about these?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, but what it really comes to what it makes me question is, how long has this been going on? We have a massive balloon that's completely, clearly visible to numerous people, But how many of these other smaller devices have been floating through our skies that NORAD's only starting to pick up? I mean, are we assuming this has been happening since the Cold War, maybe even earlier?
Right, and there's a lot of indication that a lot of the visuals and radar information that we've picked up from the Navy over the past 5 years has been implicated in these and we don't know what these other three objects are. We're going to dig deeper into that here in a few minutes, but were those Navy interactions in what way were they related? Because we know there's got to be some sort of relation, but in what way are they related to what we're seeing today? It's quite crazy. So just to shift to the Chinese spy balloon, which was first spotted 60,000. This was 60,000 feet in the air over Billings, Montana on February 1st. It passed through Alaska and Canada, as well as parts of Idaho, Missouri, and Missouri before the military shot it down above the Atlantic Ocean off of South Carolina. And they were given the okay to shoot it down by Joe Biden on February 4th, just off the coast of Carolina. And I'll let you speak to that, Brooks, as Randy pulls up the video of the shoot down.
I am so really interested. I mean, I guess there's a possibility of collateral damage, but why we waited so long to make the decision to destroy it? My guess, the reason that they picked South Carolina was that they assumed Myrtle Beach was dispensable, that no one would really miss it.
Just really, this is your opportunity to give Myrtle Beach a jab.
Hey, why not? But in all seriousness, I mean, even something like this, there is with an area like Montana that doesn't have a lot of centrally located population. Why not go ahead and take it out there? Curious as to what the reasoning by our SecDef was, by our Joint Chiefs of Staff, and ultimately the president. Why to wait so long?
Right.
The Associated Press. We're checking Twitter on several different official. Well, I believe it just happened there. That was it. Live, raw, and unfiltered. It appears that China spy balloon has now been shot down over the Atlantic Ocean. You are taking a live look here, live, raw, and unfiltered, as that balloon appears to be heading downward after it has been shot down.
Things that we do know, and we're going to go into Tim McMillan from The Debrief has been covering this story both at The Debrief and on Twitter for the past many days since February 1st. And we're going to go through his summary of events a little bit later as we go through all of these items. But just quickly, just when it comes to this particular balloon, the U.S. government is still investigating. They have some of the payload. They do not have all of it currently. They say that it was equipped with an antenna that could locate communications devices and intercept calls made on them. The incident has added to the rising tension between U.S. and China, with the Secretary of State canceling a planned trip to Beijing and China rebuffing attempts to discuss the incident. China has a spy balloon program in addition to its reconnaissance satellites, with the balloons appearing to focus on collecting communications. And I think that's an interesting point, because I'm sitting here going, again, what in this modern age of espionage and warfare, what is the value of a balloon? And I think being able to intercept communications is something that I had not considered previously, but I also didn't realize it could do that at 60,000 feet. I mean, that's just incredible.
That is pretty impressive. It's a heck of an antenna.
That's a heck of an antenna. Now, the speculation is the Biden administration is intending to use the incident to rally allies and convince them that China's global ambitions could involve infringements on their sovereignty. So when we talk about the drumbeat of war and whether or not this is something that the United States is using as a way to implicate China and potential independent countries' sovereignty, but is it pushing? Do you think this, Brooks, pushes us towards war in any way?
I don't think it does any more than I don't think it increases the chance any more than anything else does. To be perfectly honest, what's going to come down to war is whether or not China decides to physically invade Taiwan. That's going to be the crux of it for us. What this may do is help predispose some of our allies to be prepared for a Taiwanese invasion and have them ready to jump on our side rather than wait for the actual, first boots on the ground to occur.
That's a really good point, because having looked into the strategic direction of both China and the United States over the past 10 years, and the ability that we have to have good communication and to be, we're the two biggest economies in the world. We are reliant on each other in so many ways. The idea of the idea of a world war with China and their allies seems so unlikely to me. It just doesn't make any sense. But to your point, we have a huge obligation to Taiwan. And China, as part of their one China policy, still believes to this day that Taiwan is not a sovereign nation and it does belong to mainland China. And so we've got this sort of Cold War standoff about Taiwan for a very long time. And I just wonder if this Chinese balloon incident moves us deeper into this Cold War, or if it actually inspires hot weaponry.
So I think it probably does push us a touch deeper, but I mean, it moves the needle so minimally. Really, the difference that I would say between this Cold War and what we had in with the USSR is that the convergence of our economies is so deeply embedded with each other that there is no way that we go into an all-out direct war without tanking both of our economies. Neither of us are in such an independent position that we can utilize our, domestic resources to survive in the long run. Right.
I agree with that. Dark Sage says, I have an interesting question for this panel regarding society today. We'd love to hear it. Lou, what's going on, brother? Good, great to see you. Randy, do me a favor. We've got another article here from The Drive, and they're two great. If you guys haven't checked out The Drive or The Debrief, these guys are doing phenomenal work when it comes to really looking at the state of play of technology in warfare and potentially, what we're going to see over the coming years. But this is an article that was written by The Drive. And basically, I'll just give you kind of the recap here. So the U.S. Air Force used U-2S Dragon Lady spy planes to monitor and gather intelligence on Chinese government surveillance balloon that passed over the parts of the U.S. and Canada. The U-2S was chosen for its ability to fly persistently at higher altitudes than the balloon and gather high-quality visuals and electronic emissions on the balloon, and the U-2S is equipped with a range of sensors and data links, which allowed it to gather critical intelligence about the balloon's design capabilities and satellite communications. So the question becomes, again, what about these types of balloons, about this type of espionage, makes sense in this day of modern technology? And again, I think it comes down to their ability to be tracked. They're not very noticeable. I mean, at 60,000 feet, it is a surprise we saw this thing in the first place, but obviously 60,000 feet is not high enough for civilians not to be able to see it. But they can also be deployed at low cost. They can cover huge amounts of area over long periods of time. They can gather intelligence that satellites and aircraft can't, such as environmental factors or signals from radios or mobile phones. So you have to imagine that some of these truckers going down the road have had some intercepts on ham radio going through some of these balloons. It's low cost, low profile, and a flexible way to gather intelligence. This was all news to me. I had no idea that this was something that we would be seeing, in this day and age.
So I think you bring up a couple of really big factors there. One, it's cheap. It's not super expensive to produce, create, or lose, right? And then on the other side of that, we, as a sovereign nation, we don't have a lot of inspiration to go and capture this thing. There's probably no technology on it that's going to benefit us from an OPSEC perspective. And ultimately, I think maybe the reason that this is a big deal is it's a really big balloon, and like you said, it was visible to civilians. There have been so many of these other smaller objects that we've seen that are being picked up by NORAD now that very likely would not have been noticed by civilians, except for maybe potential, civilian pilots, which we've obviously seen videos and had some interesting interactions in the past for UAP of that perspective. But in terms of why this is suddenly such a big deal, this one just happened to be big enough and in the right place that a lot of people saw it. You've probably seen this come up that at least 3 balloons of a similar nature, maybe not similar size, entered U.S. airspace under the Trump administration and were covered up.
I wasn't even aware of that at all. I didn't even run across that.
Yeah, I'll find you a source for it, make it a little bit easier for us. But yeah, there was an acknowledgement that at least 3 different balloons came across our airspace during the Trump administration, and they weren't just not. They were either ignored or just covered up completely.
That's wild. All right. So, well, going on to that, I think that's an important segue into our next piece about the UFO shot down in Alaska. If you could bring that up for us, Randy, that Forbes article. So, again, Chinese spy balloon was spotted on February 1st, shot down on February 4th, and then an unidentified object over Alaskan airspace was shot down on February 10th by the U.S. military on that Friday afternoon through and it was relayed to us through Press Secretary Pat Ryder. He noted that little was known about the object, which officials did not indicate was connected to a suspected Chinese spy balloon. So they were quick to say that that is not what it was. The high altitude airborne object, described as about the size of a small car, was shot down at 1:45 p.m. Friday after it was spotted traveling northeast across Alaska on Thursday. He added that it was not a similar size or shape to the Chinese balloon. A senior U.S. official told Fox News that the object entered U.S. airspace before it was detected by the military over Alaska, not far from the northeast coast. It was flying at about 40,000 feet in the air, so about 20,000 feet lower than the Chinese balloon. And the object did not appear to be self-maneuvering. It was unmanned. And he said that the object was at the mercy of the prevailing winds. An interesting fact here is the object was shot down by an F-22 fighter jet with an AIM-9X missile, both of which were also used to shoot down the balloon. But what we don't know, or what we didn't know at the time, was provided the limited information about the object's physical appearance, only noting it was not similar to the Chinese balloon. Its identification as an object is because the best description we have, it's the best description we have right now. We don't know who owns it, whether it's state-owned or corporate-owned or privately owned. We just don't know. So that's really interesting. You'd think if there was this sort of flap going on, that there was this sort of anti-Chinese sentiment, that it would, if it was any sort of what people often say is a psyop, it would seem odd that they would not be blaming the Chinese. And so, it does appear that the government's never transparent with us, but it does appear that it's not some sort of united effort to blame China.
Yeah, I appreciate they didn't propagandize this and try to turn it into some sort of a spin thing. I think that of that list that you made, whether it's something that's domestic or international or potentially private, I think the most interesting thing to look at is that this could just be a hobbyist potentially. The technology that's out there now, whether it's drone technology or using something like a balloon to lift an object to a high level, separate, and now you've got a large flying device. It's something you or I could do if we wanted to go make a video to show everyone that we could do it. I'm sure we could come up with a solution there.
That's a really good point. There's so much technology, and the hobbyist has access to things that we've never had before. And the question then becomes, Brooks, because we saw this Chinese spy balloon, because civilians saw it, because it entered the news cycle, and then NORAD started looking at looking for other objects with their radars more tuned, are we potentially wasting military resources on shooting down hobbyist aircraft with F-22s?
It's very possible. I think that one of the reasons that we decided to go shoot down some additional objects was potentially because of the same question that I posed. There's a lot of individuals in this country who want to know why it took so long, and maybe it made sense to wait 3 days to shoot down the balloon. But I can also see the understanding prevailing solution be let's go show them that we're going to be more proactive, right?
Absolutely. The next one, it was actually really weird. Just as we saw these things happening over and over, my kids started asking me, like, what, are we at war? Like, what is going on? And I think the ambiguity of all the things that are happening people want to put together a narrative, right? It's very natural. It's very easy for all of us to go, okay, we see a pattern, and then rather than taking a beat, taking a deep breath, and really looking into what is happening, it's much more fun to create a narrative around it. What are some of the more fun narratives you've run across, Brooks?
Well, I mean, the prevailing most fun was always going to be that these are extraterrestrial, identifying data collection craft of some form. Everyone wants the ET story, right? I've seen some other fun ones. Everything from this is our old story, was that the ancient civilization off the coast of California is sending their spycraft against us. That's a good one.
That's a fun one. And yeah, I mean, we can't not entertain. Randy, who's behind the scenes today, tweeted something out that was hilarious the other day. It's talking about how if he was his 11-year-old self, he would have been so excited because we were this close. We're this close to contacting ET, and ET is here. I think a lot of folks really, my inner child would love that as well. But it doesn't appear that that's what we're seeing here.
No, and really, I think that one of the reasons we all want it to be aliens is so that we can just end all of this finally, and have a happy final solution to the human problem, right?
Yikes. So the next object to get shot down was actually in Canada. This was the February the 11th. If you want to pull that the tweet from Justin Trudeau, Randy, and I just got another. Lou Jimenez just sent me an interesting article that we might pull up here in a second. But the Canadian object that was shot down, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he ordered the takedown of an unidentified flying object over Canada's Yukon territory on Saturday, February 11th. The object was shot down by U.S. F-22 from the U.S. and Canadian North American Aerospace Defense Command, Trudeau said. I spoke with President Biden this afternoon. You gotta love being Canada. You don't have to waste your own F-22s on this thing.
I'm just really excited to see the F-22 finally see some action, albeit shooting down balloons, but
So this particular one was shot down over Canada using an AIM-9X missile, same type of missile. Following close coordination with the U.S. and Canada, the object was detected by the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, over Alaska, and was monitored as it crossed into Canadian airspace, where Canadian CF-18 and CP-140 aircraft joined the formation. The U.S. President Joe Biden authorized the U.S. military to work with Canada to take down the high-altitude craft. Both leaders agreed to continue closing workly to defend our airspace. And then another one over Lake Michigan. So this was on, was it Sunday morning? I believe it was Sunday morning. We've got a video here. You want to pull that up for us quickly, Randy?
U.S. military has shot down another flying object, this time over the Great Lakes. Officials say President Biden ordered the military to shoot it down today. They say it's the same object that was detected by radar over Montana yesterday. This is now the third straight day an unidentified flying object has been shot down over North American airspace. One was shot down Saturday over northern Canada, and another was shot down Friday near Alaska. A week ago, the U.S. military shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina.
We're going to probably be able to piece together this whole surveillance balloon and know exactly what's going on. So that's a huge coup for the United States.
Officials say that since the Chinese spy balloon incident, the U.S. military now has its eyes focused on the skies above in a way that it necessarily didn't have before.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Get more great ABC7 content by clicking the subscribe button for...
Yeah. Speaking of clicking the subscribe button, if you're here and you haven't clicked the subscribe button, please do that. Make sure you like at the bottom of the screen. It helps us get out to a wider audience. We are going to be bringing you technological advancements, things that are changing the way humans live, and trying to get a look at how we can be prepared for some of these changes coming up, whether it comes to AI, drones, technology that is evolving in extraordinary rates. So thank you so much for joining us here at the Singularity Lab. We're going to keep you updated and informed as these things continue to break. as far as our inner child goes, Tim McMillan put this tweet up a few days ago. If you want to share this quickly, Randy, and it is not ruling out ET. So this is from the NORAD commander, Glenn Vanderheck. I'll let the intel community and counterintelligence community figure that out. I haven't ruled out anything at this point. Now, this is obviously a standard line. This is not something that this official is saying is ET. But when you have very little data, ruling anything out is probably not that intelligent.
Yeah, you always start with the open-ended. Let's not rule anything out until we at least have some of the debris and some of the reconnaissance done. I just want to talk about how sexy those F-22s looked in that video. Whew. I wouldn't mind having one of those in my backyard.
They are incredible machines. All right. So this is what I've been kind of struggling with. And we hit on this a little bit earlier in the show, but why, after we saw this Chinese spy balloon, why do we have an incident, another incident, another incident? What's going on, with our continental, technological capabilities that is now we're all of a sudden seeing all these objects. Official John Kirby of the National Security Council, and you can share this, Randy, if you don't mind, actually speaks to this directly. So we're gonna see what he has to say.
That we think we're seeing more is because we're looking for more. As you heard General Van Herk last night, they have modified the filters and the gains, as we call it, of the radar capabilities to look.
Can you pause that real quick? So that's interesting. They've modified the gains and the filters of our radar to start looking for lower altitude objects across the continental United States and Canada. So I think that's probably an important point here for us to recognize that it's like Randy made the metaphor earlier before the show. You've got a dirty room and you don't know where your GI Joes are, and all of a sudden you go to clean it and you find all your stuff, right? So it's this idea that we just weren't looking. And this is surprising, by the way, considering the fact that we've got this. We've a lot of people have been lobbying Congress to look into these. Since 2017, since the New York Times story broke, which has a lot of factual errors in it that we've come to realize over time, but it did start pushing people to push Congress to start looking into these UAPs, UFOs, and other objects. And so now we're in this sort of position where we've been looking into it, but the executive branch wasn't interested, but now the executive branch is interested. I'm not sure exactly.
So there's actually a lot to unpack here, right? It's not just turning the gains and the filters down so that we adjust the altitude we're looking in. It's also the size of the objects that are not getting screened and the velocity that they're moving. And one of the reasons for that is that there's so much noise, whether it's like a flock of birds or it's wind debris or whatever else might be. But one of the interesting things from the other side of technology that we have now is we have these algorithms, these machine learning programs that can look at that data even at a lower filtered level or a lower filtered level with a lot more noise in it and identify what's signal and what's noise. And that gives NORAD an opportunity to go and check some of these things and not just run into a big group of geese over and over again.
Right. He speaks to this a little further in the next clip here, Randy. If you could roll that next clip, I think it's at 25 minutes or so. And while he's doing that, make sure you click the like button and subscribe below. Again, we're going to be here every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sharing with you what's breaking in technology. Yeah, go ahead and thanks so much, Randy. Yeah, turn it up. Turn it all the way up.
has the decision about, or has the threshold for the use of fighters to take down objects also been tweaked? Has it been lowered? Has it been changed? We've never seen this before. All of a sudden, we've seen
Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't understand it at first. No, I mean, and you heard General Van Herk talk about this last night. He's using established protocols to engage craft in the air, aircraft in the air, that can be legitimately brought down. And as he said last night, the best way to do that, certainly in a timely and efficient, effective way, was through fighter aircraft and through the Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. And they looked at, and he talked about this, they looked at other options to try to bring them down, to include gunfire, but that would have presented a greater risk to the pilots themselves. So this was the safest, most effective way to do that. Now, where we go from here, I think we just don't know right now in terms of whether there needs to be threshold changes, as you put out. I think it's important to just take a step back here, and remember what the president did was order these actions with the safety and security of the American people foremost in his mind.
Let's pause it there, and
very good reasons to,
because this is an important thing to unpack too. Because he said in the beginning, he said, well, we're seeing them now because we're looking for them on radar, right? We've changed our filters. We've reduced the gain. Is that what he said?
Correct.
Reduce the gain. And so now we're seeing these objects. And then the question there was, well, is it standard protocol just to shoot everything down you see? Like, like what is the protocol? Because, we've not heard about anything over the continental U.S. being shot down in any recent period of time, or I don't know, ever. I don't know. When was the last time we shot something down over the continental U.S. or Canada? So this idea that, well, yeah, it's standard protocol. Of course, this is standard engagement procedures. Is it standard engagement procedures? I don't know.
Well, maintain sovereign airspace would always be one of our highest priorities. But
so you're saying it would just be the fact that because we're seeing them and finding them now, that it would be standard procedure. And he goes on to say that, well, now we need to take another look, because what if it is just hobbyists, right?
Sure. Yeah, and that's the thing. When you've got a manned aircraft, right, that's got a radio in it, you can reach out, identify, make them identify themselves, then go chase them down, and if you need to, eliminate them. But in this case, you have an unresponsive craft, and the amount of money and time that would go into chasing everything down that's not just geese becomes tremendous over time.
Right. Swink McLeod says, but how do you prove it is not domestic before you shoot it out of the sky?
I don't know that you can. I mean, unless everyone starts, we'll put big Singularity Lab stickers on anything we throw up in the sky for future use.
I'm not sure that I want. That would probably be good advertising.
All press.
Yeah, you're right.
Press.
You're right. All press is good press. Going back to Tim McMillan here, he's got if we could pull that up, Randy, and then if you can go as full screen as possible on it. It's a summary or a recap of the events. So we'll just go through this. It's a quick summary of all the events that have led up to this. I think he's pulling it up now. Yeah. Okay. So this was published on, the first thread here was published on February 13th. So this would have been today. He said, just now, there's no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns, as per the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. Beginning in June, President Biden has been receiving daily briefings specifically on unidentified aerial phenomenon. So this is a big change. So since June, he's actually been getting briefings on this. The 3 objects downed over the weekend were not assessed as posing a threat to anyone on the ground. So no threat to people on the ground. No communications transmissions were detected. Objects ruled to be unmanned. No wreckage from any of the objects has been recovered so far. That's really interesting. And I know there were weather issues, and that was a big part of the problem, is in Alaska when I think in Alaska, both Alaska and Canada, it was over. Or no, the Alaska one was over water, I believe. Lake Huron, Michigan was over water. I'm not sure about the one in Canada. Do you know anything about that?
I think it was in a very remote area. I'm not sure if it was over water or not, but the issue with all of these is none of them are going to be particularly easy to recover any sort of debris from.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. President has directed a redoubling of efforts for a whole of government approach to accessing and investigating unidentified aerial phenomena. One of the reasons we think we're seeing more is because we're looking for more. As they previously shared. When asked, NSC spokesperson John Kirby says the 3 down unidentified objects are still being described as objects, not balloons. The one over Lake Huron actually was described as an octagon, which is quite interesting. But I mean, you know, they're looking at this thing through flybys in an F-22. Like, how do you get good eyes on that?
And those U-2 spycraft.
And the what?
And those U-2 spycraft that you mentioned earlier.
U-2?
Yeah, the U-2 spycraft, the little spy.
Right. Okay, got it. Sidewinder missiles were the safest and most effective way to take down these objects. Kirby says any imagery of the objects captured during the recent shootdowns would be questions for the DoD, so we're all looking forward to that imagery. Some, but not all, of the payload from the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina has been collected. So we've got nothing. We've got no physical evidence yet from the 3 that were shot down. After the spy balloon, we've collected some of the payload from the spy balloon in South Carolina. When asked why some of the UAP incidents in the ODNI report were not being shot down, it comes down to safety. And in many cases, these events occurred in MOA and are fleeting events. What have you learned since these objects were shot down? We haven't found the debris. I'm not forecasting how easy it's going to be to find, and it has not been determined if the objects shot down were lighter than air or heavier than air. So we don't know if they're balloons or drones at this point.
And they could be something kind of in between where you have a small framework that's very lightweight, maybe not lighter than air, but very lightweight, that's able to provide some maneuverability, some sort of a gliding pattern, and they could even potentially have used a balloon to get to that altitude and then detach the balloon, or the balloon itself, you know, maybe due to heat or something or lack thereof, reduces itself in size. There's a lot of potential formats that these craft could take that aren't necessarily clearly a drone or clearly a balloon.
Great point. Winning Black says China quickly admitted the spy balloon was theirs, so why wouldn't they admit these latest objects? Makes no sense. Well, right. Yeah, exactly. So they're not going to take credit for these objects.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. No, not evidence was shot down. Yeah, this is very, very interesting. Neurostream says, I think they're being weird about the word balloon, likely to be just lighter than aircraft, like a Zeppelin or dirigible.
Dirigible,
when technically aren't balloons. What is a dirigible?
Dirigible is just another word for a balloon. I mean, really, a Zeppelin and a dirigible are similar. They use some sort of a large volume of gas with a framework around it to fly.
Right. Jazz Shaw says balloons are objects. The Pentagon is being very vague and disingenuous. Again, balloons absolutely can be classified as objects. Yeah, wild stuff.
Well, I think that the reason... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Randy. What we got? Oh, you're showing a dirigible.
Yeah, well, Zeppelin. Oh, the humanity.
Yes. Yeah, so I do wonder, to your point about, oof, look at that.
And that's why we don't use hydrogen in balloons anymore.
You got to learn somehow.
You
got to learn somehow. Jason Brown says, an object the size of a small car would need propulsion and wings to stay aloft at 40,000 feet, but that wouldn't necessarily be true with a balloon, would it?
Well, so think of it like this, right? Imagine that it has some form of propulsion that gets it up to, say, 60,000 feet. And then, because of the way that it's designed to use air resistance to glide or slowly float, it could take a significant amount of time to go from, say, 60,000 feet down to the 40,000 feet. So maybe the intent isn't to stay aloft indefinitely, but rather to make a slow descent back down to Earth while it gathers whatever data it wants to gather.
That's a really interesting point. Grant says, if foreign adversarial surveillance is likely intent to observe U.S. response, i.e. F-22 capabilities, from a spy satellite. That's interesting. Arlene says, the Goodyear dirigible.
Well, while we're on balloons and dirigibles, I just think it's worth mentioning that there are only like 11 functioning blimps in the entire world. You know, you think there's a bunch of these things, and there's like, I'll double check while we're thinking about it. I want to say 11 is the number of functioning blimps in the world. And Goodyear
let's get a
owns
fact check on that.
Yeah, I'm fact checking myself here. This is
That's
my
interesting.
old trivia Brooks coming back for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, while you do that, Brooks, so let's see here. We've got a couple other people. Somebody just
25,
mentioned 25. There are only 25 blimps in the world. Is that right? That's wild. Somebody mentioned that, have we touched on Lou Elizondo's statement to the New York Times? We have not, and I don't know what that statement is. So if you have it, please share it with us, or Randy, if you find it, feel free to pop it up. Starslinger says, we need the data of the object prior to them shooting it down. Was it moving at all or completely stationary? We can glean a lot of info from that data. Yes, absolutely. Jason says, yes, gas expansion would make it larger than the size of a small car, 40,000 feet, if it was a balloon. I'm also gonna, if you could, Brooks, just talk us through any other thoughts you have on that. I'm just gonna grab a link here and send it over to Randy. I don't even know what this is, but Lou sent it over, and I'm gonna have him show that as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that when we're still talking about kind of structure, fit, and format for what this could be. There's a lot of options out there that involve a combination of whether it started off being lifted by a balloon. It could potentially have been, I don't want to say it's rocket propelled. That'd be too visible. That's something that would probably flag NORAD to see a rocket that's large enough to send something to 60,000 feet. But there are other lighter than air mechanisms that could allow something to get up to a really high level, and then detach potentially, as I mentioned before, or even change its framework to allow it to settle at the 40,000 foot range. I don't know what the altitudes were on the other two. I think I saw 40,000 that was the one for the Great Lakes, right? And then I don't know that we saw a specific number for Alaska or for Canada, did we?
I don't think so, but I'm not positive. I'd have to go back and double check.
But I would say, I mean, I think we're going to continue to see more of these devices, and I still believe that there's a good chance that there's a lot of hobbyists and small organizations that have no nefarious intent, that are just trying to gather data, or even just from a hobbyist perspective, see how big of a device or cool of a device they can make.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a whole new era of the DIY, of the DIYer, right? You can find literally anything that you want to build on YouTube. The technology is growing so quickly. I'm a little concerned more about the implications of what this does to, could these ultimately just be distractions for the military? I mean, our military spending is so insane, right? We just spend so much money on the military in this country, and I'm not here to today have a discussion on the pros and cons of that, but I do think it is concerning to think that we could be deploying resources, to using F-22s to fight, and Sidewinder missiles to shoot down hobbyist architectures.
Well, absolutely. And then if you are an adversarial force and you really want to stick it to the U.S. in terms of numbers of dollars, if you realize we're going to shoot everything down, you just start sending every little crappy craft you can across our borders and make us spend millions and millions of dollars dealing with it. I mean, there is that potential concern there.
Yeah, and you think about and I think, you know, part of the reason we started this show talking about what the Japanese were doing in World War II, sending these balloons to the United States using the jet stream and attacking us with payloads from, you know, thousands of miles away. When it comes to the ability to, you know, just put so much noise out there that it's confusing and distracting. And you know, somebody reached out to me the other day and they're like, is this whole thing, is all of this just a distraction? And I was like, well, a distraction from what? And he was like, well, you know, there's all the politics of the Biden administration and this, that, the other. And I'm going, if it's a distraction from the US government as a psyop, that to me is a giant stretch. What's not a giant stretch is to believe that we've got so much noise in our skies and potentially spy drones, espionage, hobbyists, Chinese spy balloons, like the amount of things that can and are in our skies, that to me, I don't see it as a distraction or a psyop. I see it as distracting and potentially very confusing, not only to the American people, but to the military of the United States.
Definitely. You know, and so I just saw the quote that was put up by Elizondo in the chat, but that's basically what I was just saying is, and what you were just saying is that, he's saying that it was a Chinese operation, for China. So a Chinese operation, correct, to make us pay attention to this stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think you make a great point, Mike, in the sense that, you know, whether it's in our airspace, whether it's in, you know, low orbit. I mean, we just had that Russian spy satellite that fragmented itself, fell apart in low altitude orbit. That's going to potentially have debris in the atmosphere for the next 100 years or so. That's going to make it more difficult for us to deploy satellites. One of the things as we continue to regulate airspace and even, you know, up to the exosphere, we're going to have noise and we're going to have a series of events that occur that are going to cause us to be more. We need to be more determined as to what we allow into those areas. We need to be more protective of how we clean those areas up, whether it's orbit or it's even our own airspace, and ensure that we can use both satellites and aircraft the way we need to.
So we're going to need to, this sounds like to me that the U.S. military and our allies are going to need to get really clear on what we're looking for. And I think that it's not just a matter of honing our sensors and being able to, you know, engage everything, but we need to be able to discern what is an actual threat versus what is not a threat. Speaking of that, perfect segue for Jazz Shaw's $25 donation. Thank you so much, Jazz. Always been a huge supporter of the show. He actually helped me get up to, I think like 2,500, or no, he could help me get up to my first 1,000 followers here on the YouTube channel. Jazz, you are a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you so much for all you've ever done for the show and for this donation. He says, forgiving you for blatantly ignoring the likelihood that these were all objects controlled by the dolphins.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
So long and thanks for all the fish. Well, most of you don't know out there is that what we could be seeing in our skies is directly related to marine life that has evolved under the seas and is now coming up and rearing its porpoise-like head yet again. Jazz, thank you so much. We love you here, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, as we all know, dolphins are the second most intelligent species on the planet, following mice, of course.
Can you
Douglas
elaborate?
Adams. It's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Very nice. What do we got? What do we got here, Randy? What are we looking at? Oh, this is okay. So this is all right. So Lou Jimenez just sent me a link. I have no idea what we were about to watch.
And with Lou, you never know.
With Lewis, you never know. The title is "Prepare for the Worst." Former Army Secretary issues stark warning. Let's hear it.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm just right outside I'm in the domestic
Crank it up
area
all the way
outside the stadium to speak to a very special person with a great message. It's Patrick Murphy to my immediate right. He's got a great blazer on and a great message. The former Secretary of the Army. Great to see you, sir.
Brian, great to be with you.
All right, first off, let's just do some fun stuff. Okay. You got a few players from the academies playing in this game.
That's right. Yeah, we have on the Philadelphia Eagles, my team, where I used to be a Philadelphia Eagles.
Wait, we're talking about the Super Bowl?
Blazer.
What's
We
happening?
have Brett Toth, backup offensive lineman, 1999 graduate of West Point. And then on the Chiefs
Told you
side,
you never
we
know
have
it's
Cole
blue.
Christensen.
3 recovery operations
Oh, here we
underway,
go.
and then we haven't figured out what happened last night with Montana. I know you're an Army guy, but tell me what's going on.
Well, my brother's an Air Force officer, now retired, but this is a breach of our sovereignty. They know they're not supposed to be in our space.
Only one confirmed
they?
to be from China.
Well, we've now took out 3 aircraft, and then last night, as you mentioned, in Montana, there was a ping on the radar. Now we don't know what that ping is. We scrambled our fighter jets. We could not get eyes. We don't know what exactly it was, but it could have been, how radar is. It could have been anything. But
This
the reality
dude's
of it is
speculating
that
like
need to
we
make
are.
sure we protect our country.
We had a ping.
We had a ping. Yeah,
Well,
that's,
the thing
this,
is turning those pings and finding a way that doesn't involve scrambling aircraft to determine if the ping is viable or not is exactly what you were saying, Mike. Is we need to come up with a definitive set of protocols that will determine, through a work stream, does this meet the requirements to get eyes on it? Do we have a more cost-effective way to get eyes on something than scrambling fighter jets? What other resources can we that are hopefully closer to something as remote as Montana can we utilize to get eyes on it if we need to? And then if it's a threat, we can scramble fighter jets.
Great point. Now, this brings us to another concerning piece of this puzzle for folks who are interested in this whole idea of disclosure and people who want the government to be more transparent with the American people about what we're seeing in our skies. Again, going back to 2017, the New York Times article, again, a lot of factual inaccuracies. But we have had a movement of people wanting disclosure, which is the idea that they want the government to release what they know about any unidentified aerial phenomenon that has been happening in our skies. Now, as an American citizen, as a sovereign citizen, I want the truth, right? But if I get the truth, so do the Chinese, so do the Russians, so do any potentially adversaries that the United States have. So in what likelihood, if we're talking about getting down to, okay, we need to figure out what's a distraction and what isn't, I don't think it bodes well for us as citizens getting the true information, because they're trying to manage military secrecy alongside protecting the borders. It's a conundrum, man.
So let's use an example from World War II again as a perfect segue here. There was a U.S. senator who made the mistake of announcing publicly that one of the reasons we were doing so well in the Pacific was that Japanese depth charges were not going low enough to hit U.S. submarines. He made it as an offhanded comment during a press release, and the Japanese realized, oh, well, that's easy. We'll just increase the depth of our depth charges by 300 additional meters. And next thing you know, we no longer have the water superiority that we did before. We lost 116 or something like that submarines in the next year or so versus, a fifth of that the prior year because of a simple statement made by someone who had been read in that shouldn't have.
Loose lips sink ships.
Or submarines.
Or submarines. Ooh, what do we got here? The Battle of Los Angeles. We've got to figure out a way to pipe. Oh, okay. Okay. Searches and anti-craft guns comb sky during alarm. We need to be able to pipe Randy's voice in here so he can bring up stuff he finds, because I have no idea.
We can find a way to do it where he's like the man behind the curtain.
Yes, we have to. Oh, he's highlighting. Okay, he's going to highlight. The Battle of Los Angeles, also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, is the name given by contemporary sources to a nuanced attack on the continental United States by Imperial Japan and the subsequent anti-aircraft artillery barrage, which took place from the late February 24th to early February 24th to early 25th of February 1942 over Los Angeles, California. Wow, I haven't even heard of this.
Oh, you had this. So this is an interesting one. There was a lot of some people believed it was UFOs that they saw. Some people believed that it was war hysteria. That people were just so sure that the Japanese were finally going to hit us that they were seeing things, and not to even be confused with the times that a U.S. battleship tried to attack Venus for about 45 minutes because they thought it was approaching Japanese aircraft in the sky.
I do wonder to what level things like Foo Fighters, these sort of conversations we have hearing from fighter pilots in World War II, to what extent, they are misidentifications. And again, I share this, I share this often. I'm a pretty open-minded guy. I want to believe, but I'm also a very evidence-driven person, and to my experience, the human mind is so fallible, right? Our psychological state. We were talking about this the other day over on Lou's show, and this idea that they were talking about the Nimitz, or I can't. It was the Tic Tac incident with David Fravor and Alex Dietrich, and Alex's recollection of that is like 5 seconds or 10 seconds long, whereas Fravor's recollection was like 5 or 10 minutes. And, one of the lowest forms of evidence is an eyewitness account. And so, you can have, like, for example, if there was if two people saw a murder and they both saw it from two different angles, from two different perspectives, they could have wildly different accounts of what they saw, but there was in fact a murder. It just the human mind is so fallible. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to take any sort of hearsay as evidence, as physical evidence.
And there's two major mechanisms involved there. One, our perception is widely variegated. So first, when we actually perceive it, what we think we perceive changes person to person. And then second is recall. Every time you recall a memory, you're actually manipulating the memory when it gets reimposed in the long-term potentiation. So every time you've gone back and revisited that, you've potentially altered it. And that's why, just like you said, first-person accounts are horrifically inaccurate for any sort of evidence-based, validity.
Right, and this is where a fish story comes from, right? It's the idea that you experience something, and then you tell that story, and then when you tell that story, and every person I know on this planet exaggerates a story, whether it's a little bit or a lot, even if it's just a tiny bit, just to make it a little more enjoyable for the person listening. You just exaggerate just a little bit. Come on, I'd love to hear who in the chat right now has never exaggerated a story, because when you exaggerate, the very fact of you exaggerating a little bit, you're going to remember it slightly different the next time, whether you mean to or not.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a malicious intent. It's just kind of how we operate as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's certainly not malicious. It's just, we like stories. Human beings are storytellers.
We are narrative driven for sure.
We're narrative driven. This is why the human memory operates so well. It's so much easier to remember a story than it is to remember a date or a fact, right? It's so much easier to remember a story. That's why the human species has passed down, when you think of native cultures and tribal cultures, and they were passing down story generation after generation after generation, because that's how humans remember. We didn't spend a whole lot of time saying, this is a fact and that is a fact. We told stories in order to help shape the next generation, and so you can go really deep on this subject, because that then means all of the stories, all of the things that we share are constantly being shaped and changed by not only our perception, but by how we tell the story.
Absolutely. And I think that human focus and evolutionary dependence on narration is something we're going to focus on in our other project.
Yes. Do you want to? So real quick, just so folks out there know, Brooks and I, not only are we creating content for you guys weekly, every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you click the little bell below so you get notified anytime that we go live. But we'll be live here on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern. But we're also working on another project. Do you want to share a little bit about that project, Brooks?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Fire and Fermentation, and it's really going to take us through the history of food and humanity and how culture is derived by what we've eaten, what we've consumed over, a few thousand generations, and how it got us to where we are now. One of our commenters said that the human brain isn't ready for the technology we have, and that's something we're going to discuss from a more primordial sense rather than on the other end of it, which we do here with the Singularity Lab.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool, this idea of, the Singularity Lab is going to be looking at what's happening today, how we're evolving, and how technology is shaping our culture and our society and where we're headed. And then we're also going to take Fire and Fermentation and look into the past and look at how humans have evolved over time. And I think it's this really cool dichotomy of, how we look at ourselves as humans. I think the more we understand about ourselves, and the more we understand our cognitive biases, and the more we can understand about human perception, and how we evolve to have the traits that we have today, we'll be more able to take on the future. Because at the rate that technology is changing, it could be a really scary thing. I'm an optimist. I enjoy technology. I love to watch what's evolving and how it's evolving, and I love to bring that to you guys. But it's really interesting, to look back at the past. Swink McCloud says you guys should do a show while barbecuing. I think we are definitely going.
There will be live fire. There will be fire. There will be fermentation.
There will be fire, and there will be fermentation. Fantastic. Okay, so let's bring this back around. Let's kind of wrap up. So today we've talked about, and if you guys are just catching us late, make sure you go back to and start at the beginning, because there's some really interesting information about Japanese balloons that were used in World War II in 1945 that very few people really know about. And I think it's very valuable to try to understand again, what was used in the past, what worked in the past, and what we could be seeing today and into the future. We hit on the Chinese spy balloon, and then the three other objects that were shot down. What's your bet? What's your bet, Brooks, when it comes to? I mean, we've seen four unidentified. Well, one identified, three unidentified objects, all four of which have been blown out of the sky by Sidewinder missiles coming out of F-22s. What do you see? What do you see happening this week?
I think we're going to probably shoot a couple more down before they reintroduce what the new protocols are going to be. I do expect to see at least one more object that is definitely Chinese in an attempt to see how far they can push. I would not be surprised to see that. I do want to say this is the most excited people have been about balloons since we thought that little kid got trapped in one like 10 years ago, the balloon boy. So, balloons are getting their heyday again. That's always good to see.
Whatever's old is new again, Brooks. I mean, if we've seen bell bottoms come back, we've seen balloons come back. So I'm curious to see what comes back next.
40,000 feet, will bell bottoms continue to float?
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Make sure you click the subscribe button below. Click the bell where I don't even think it's a bell anymore. I think it says notify me. So whenever we go live, and we've got a lot of amazing stuff coming for you guys over the next several weeks and months. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jason, Swink McCloud, Paradigm Theories, Joel, Simon Fly, Arlene, Morph. It's great to have you all here with us. Oh, we are also, if you want to listen to us on the go, we just launched last week's audio podcast. So you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple Podcasts, and you can find last week's episode. I'll do my best to get this one up. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the audio podcast on Wednesdays. So we're going to be here live on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got Randy working on clips so we can get little pieces out to you guys across social media. And then we're going to be dropping these these live videos as audio on our podcast every Wednesday. So thanks so much for joining us today. You guys rock. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you next Monday.
Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe.
Randy, take us out. Oh, and don't forget to follow. Click the links below. Click them. Randy's going to take us out.
And thanks, Randy, for everything.
Thanks. Oh, yes. Thank you, Randy. Oh, also follow Randy on Twitter too. You can see his link in the